Hello, everyone, and welcome to All Blaze No Glory, the podcast. The Christmas edition. Merry Christmas, everyone. I hope you all have a happy new year, because this will be my last podcast until I come back from my honeymoon trip, which will see me return to Scotland on the 16th of January, and probably be a week or so after that before you get another podcast. So hang in there if you're an avid All Blaze No Glory listener. This podcast is brought to you this week by wickandread.com. That is a candle website ran by our very own Leslie, one of my followers, and a big time rugby lass who knows plenty about rugby. She teaches me things every day on the group chat we have. So check that out. Everyone loves a good smelly candle, handy for all different things. Get on there and have a look and use your Christmas money for that. So let's talk about some takeaways from 2022. Let's talk about the future. Let's talk about some of the memories of the podcast since it started. So first things first, let's look back on Edinburgh and Glasgow, kind of where they're at with things. Both kind of middling in the table. Glasgow just outside at the moment at 9th and Edinburgh at 6th. A little bit disappointing, particularly from Edinburgh. I think Edinburgh have got a slightly stronger side than Glasgow. They've maybe been a bit unlucky with injuries, particularly in the centres, but they need to be consistent and they need to work out what their game plan is. Edinburgh's problem from watching them, because I've actually a season ticket holder to Edinburgh, is the fact that they make dumb decisions fairly often. They go to the corner when they shouldn't. They sort of kick the points, but it's always a last resort, and it almost feels like it pains to do it. And there's a few times where they should have done it, like case in point against Castro on Saturday past on the 17th of December. They had a kickable penalty at the end of half time. Now, it wasn't a gimme, but it was a kickable penalty for Buffelli, and they chose to go to the corner, and it made no sense, because if they had kicked and missed, the half was probably over, because Castro would have just presumably touched the ball down, and that would have been the end of the half. If they kicked and got it, they would have had 17 points going into the sheds. But instead they went for the corner, they gave up a penalty, Castro decided to kick to touch, had a go at them, and they were lucky not to concede a try. So it's kind of dumb decision making like that that's Edinburgh's downfall. Looking at these great stats they've got on the URC website, it's rubbish to try and find a table on this. I cannot find the table on this. Maybe it's in Match Centre, but the table. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, why would the table be under Match Centre URC? But that aside, they've got this lovely stats thing where they give you who's top of attack and all this sort of thing. Now, Edinburgh, incidentally, are fourth in attack stats, but they're second in tries scored, so that's pretty good stead. The only team ahead of them is Leinster. But you'd think that would mean that they were a lot higher up the table. Well, there's two problems with Edinburgh. One, their defence is 9th, so it's the lower middle of the table, and their kicking stats are 14th. And actually, incidentally, their discipline's 14th as well. So they're not doing particularly well in that those sorts of things. Glasgow, on the other hand, Glasgow are what are they on attack? Sorry, my bad. They're 7th in attack, 9th in defence, 15th in kicking, and then they're 7th in discipline. And they've not got a record that's a million miles away from Edinburgh. So basically, both teams need to pull their socks up. But I think Edinburgh should be the better side and eventually win that Italian Scottish Shield. Players that I think are doing really well for the club, and I think that we all should be looking out for. I think, well, first and foremost for Edinburgh, I still think Charlie Savala is really improving game on game, and I think that he's going to eventually be someone that we're all talking about. He won't take Finn Russell's job, let's be honest with you. There's no one who should take Finn Russell's job for Scotland, but I think Charlie Savala might be his future understudy. He's just got this something about him. He's got a different game style from the likes of Hastings and from the likes of Finn Russell. He relies a lot on strength. He's definitely in my opinion, defensively the strongest 10 that Scotland have available to them if they wanted to pick a player. And that's not to say that Finn Russell, we saw Finn Russell with a big, massive tackle for Racing the other weekend. But Charlie Savala for Edinburgh, I'm still going to beat the drum for him. I think Charlie Savala is a real prospect, and he's getting more and more comfortable playing Union after coming over from League. But his natural ability, his natural strength, makes him a real force to be reckoned with. And he's actually got a nice little deft kicking game that I don't think Kinghorn necessarily has. But he doesn't seem to have the big boot that Kinghorn has, or that ability to just hit a gap and absolutely nail it every time like Kinghorn has. Because when Kinghorn finds a gap, he's off ski. Glasgow, on the other hand, I'm not as familiar with Glasgow, but I'm really excited about the prospect of Murphy Walker for Scotland, seeing what I've seen. And I think that stands Glasgow in good stead if you can keep him fit and then maybe build that with your sort of depth with Fagerson, who's still quite young for a tight head prop. You've got good tight head depth. The loose head, maybe you've got Batty. I think Batty's okay, and I think that he's a good performer for Scotland when he's played. He's not going to get a game ahead of Schumann or Sutherland if they're fit, though. That's the only thing. Just a quick, I suppose, I'm recording this on the 22nd of December. Now, I imagine most of you have seen the Glasgow-Edinburgh game. So I'm going to, you can message me abuse if I'm wrong or otherwise, but I'm going to predict that Edinburgh are going to win that game 25-19. That's going to be my prediction for the Edinburgh-Glasgow game. I think Edinburgh are just going to edge it with the squad they've put out and the packs. Whilst I think Glasgow have got a really strong pack out, I just think the way that Luke Crosby and well, it's not Luke Crosby, it's Connor Boyle. I just think with Connor Boyle back there and Jamie Ritchie, I don't see how Glasgow are going to compete at that turnover battle, but stranger things have happened, and Glasgow at home with a Glasgow crowd behind them, one of the best crowds in URC in terms of support for their own team. I think that there's every chance. Edinburgh are still pretty quiet, even though they're in damn health compared to being at Scotstoun. It's a pretty hostile place for an away team, not in a bad way, not like a sort of, as a fan you feel unsafe, but just kind of, they're pretty hostile right behind their team, which is great. I really love it, and I love the Glasgow fans, just not when they're playing Edinburgh, obviously. So yeah, I think realistically where the team should be aiming, Edinburgh should be thinking we need to get above 500 first and foremost. They've got 4 wins and 5 losses. Unfortunately, completely capitulated after a nice start against Munster. What they need to do to get themselves back on track is start being consistent in their defence. They switch off after tries, and it's awful. And it's not something that I enjoy. When they score a try, I immediately go into sort of a state of panic, thinking, are they going to secure the kickoff? Are they going to do something stupid? Are we going to get a line out and Grant Gilchrist is going to jump on top of his opposing man and get another line out penalty? And it's going to be kickable, so they're going to get 3 points back, or they're going to kick to the corner and then he'll do it again and we'll end up getting a yellow card, and we'll have all kinds of problems. So Edinburgh need to tighten up on their discipline. They need to tighten up on their kicking game and know when to kick the ball for posts and make right decisions. Glasgow, on the other hand, I'm not quite as certain what they need to do, but just based on the fact that the squad rotation for the game against Edinburgh does not look like it's a full Buna squad. Maybe I'm wrong, but there seems to be a few players missing there. That's a bit of a concern to me, but I do predict Edinburgh will narrowly win the Scotstoun game, and I think they'll probably win the 1872 Cup 2-0. And actually Edinburgh need it because they're behind in the standings in terms of they've played 9 games and they've only won 4. Whereas Glasgow do have a game in hand for the postponed game they had, so one can only hope from a Glasgow point of view that they pick up that game, and that would see them leapfrog Edinburgh as it currently stands. So Edinburgh really need to screw the nut and try and get as many points over Christmas and into the new year as they can, with Zebri visiting on the 7th of January. Anyway, moving on from rugby, because this is not just a rugby podcast, as I always bang on about, but most of my Twitter and stuff I appreciate is quite rugby orientated. I'm looking to talk about some NFL. So what can we say about the NFL this year? It's been pretty entertaining stuff. There's been some argument that it's not as high a standard as previous seasons. I don't know if that's true. Certainly, in terms of entertainment, I would say it's been fairly entertaining. I can't remember the week off the top of my head, but there was a Bills-Vikings game, and it was honestly the most exciting end to a game I have ever seen. I mean, there were some ridiculous things happening. The Bills tried a quarterback sneak out their own end zone, just to give their punter some room, and Josh Allen fumbled the ball, and Minnesota dived on it, and then it was a touchdown to Minnesota. It was the most weird game I've ever seen. So if you can go and look that up and you get the chance to check out the replays and highlights of that, go and do it. What a topsy-turvy season though compared to the season before. I mean, I'm a Rams fan, as some of you know. It's been tough going this year, and I know folk are like, well, you got your Super Bowl win, so you can't complain, and that's true, but I think at times I forget that the Rams won the Super Bowl last year because they are so bad. You can imagine, if you imagine Leinster sort of getting pumped off of Zebra every week, it's sort of like that level of capitulation. I don't know what it is. They obviously they mortgaged their future. The Rams, spending all their draft capital to get veterans, and it eventually worked. Because I tell you what, if that didn't work, and then they were playing like that after a season of even losing the Super Bowl, I honestly think heads would be rolling already, and people would be fired already. I think largely because they won a Super Bowl, the GM Les Snead and the coach Sean McVay have both got themselves a stay of execution this season, and will probably, if they both want to, continue being the Rams front office and coaching staff into the next season. So I'm sorry to dwell about the Rams because they're really at this moment the who's who of who cares. In terms of other great teams, I mean, the aforementioned Bills are absolutely quality, despite their loss to Minnesota, along with the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, the AFC is, apart from that, wide open. That's what I'm saying. It's total parity. There's 3 games left for these teams, and there is only 2 teams clinched in the AFC, and that's the Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs, who have been powerhouses for long enough. I think those 2. If the draw falls right, that's the AFC Championship game for me. I know people have mentioned other parties maybe getting involved in that, maybe the Bengals, but I don't think the Bengals have got what it takes to beat the Chiefs and the Bills this year. But the amazing thing about the AFC is the fact that none of the other teams have clinched yet. I mean, and even the division which is really poor, the AFC South, that's exciting because Jacksonville have suddenly went on a little tear. So we'll see. I actually kind of rooting for Jacksonville to get to the playoffs. It'd be pretty cool. They are, the team that always comes to London. We always see. So even if you're not a fan, it'd be quite cool to see a team that's had a wee playoff run in London as opposed to a sort of team that's just got the next first round draft pick. Anyway, moving on from the AFC, the NFC, there are 3 teams clinched. The Eagles have clinched a playoff berth, but not the division. In fact, there's 4 teams clinched, sorry. The Minnesota Vikings have clinched their division, so they'll get a home playoff game. And they've been sort of a weird revelation this year where they've kind of been the opposite of what they were last year. They had a lot of one-score losses last year. This year they've got a lot of one-score wins, and it's quite interesting. Most of their games are exciting, even if they are in a kind of comical way, like that Bills game. There was bits that were just kind of calamity. It was really good stuff. 49ers, bizarrely, the 49ers they're just walking wounded with their quarterback room. But Mr. Irrelevant, Brock Purdy, by the way, I drafted him higher in mock drafts, has actually played 2 games and won both games for them. I think that they could actually get to the Super Bowl with Brock Purdy as a quarterback. But it'll be interesting to see because the Eagles have now come out and said that Jalen Hurts is hurt, for want of a better expression, and that he might not be back until into the playoffs, or maybe like sort of in a week or 2 weeks. Now, if he only misses a week or two and he's back to full health, then fine. I think he'll need a little bit of playing time to get his rhythm back in before he goes into the playoffs. And you've got to hope if it's a shoulder injury, as has been suggested, they can still throw the ball as well as run. Because I think if all he does is run, then the defences are going to know that and they're going to play for that. So, yeah, I hope the Eagles get healthy, and I hope they have a nice little playoff run. I do quite like the Eagles. Another team though that I want to see in the playoffs, and it's exciting. It's actually a former quarterback of the Rams, is the Detroit Lions. I've got a massive soft spot for the Detroit Lions, and it's all because of Dan Campbell. Just the character, the passion he coaches with. He's the type of guy that makes that you want in sports. That's entertaining, passionate, behind his team, but not to that sort of point where there's vitriol and it's everybody's fault but his team when he loses. When they lose, he's humble but passionate about their effort, and when he win, well, he's still kind of humble, but he's very passionate about these guys, and it's quite clear that his team had come to play for him. And I think that's a massive credit to Dan Campbell as a coach, how much he's put into the programme, and they love him. And they're sitting 2 spots out of the playoffs right now, with the Washington Commanders in their sight. If Washington hadn't tied with New York, then the Detroit Lions are perhaps in a playoff spot right now. So, good. I'm hoping the Detroit Lions do this. As I say, they're a really fun, interesting team for once, because Detroit's normally awful. And it's quite funny. We swapped quarterbacks, and we sort of had the season where Detroit weren't very good last year, but they were kind of okay. And then we've had the Rams, a complete demolition job this year, and potentially they've given the Detroit Lions a draft pick that's going to be higher than their finishing spot. But anyway, that's the NFL. A quick look at the NHL, which I've been briefly following this year, and I just want to talk about one guy in the NHL that's really impressed me and made me want to kind of keep an eye on it a bit more than I used to. I kind of fell out of love with NHL. It's just the time of night it's on. It's not like the NFL where you have, at least one 6 o'clock game and one 9 o'clock game every week. It's really late, most of the time. But I want to talk about Buffalo. That's my team, the Sabres, and talk about Tage Thompson. Tage Thompson, incidentally, one of the first Sabres games I managed to catch live this year on telly, had a 5-goal night. It's one of the highest points outputs by one player of all time. It's not the highest. There's been a few players more than that, but certainly it's one of the highest that I remember in a long time as well. So that's exciting because Buffalo, for those of you who don't know the NHL very well, Buffalo are sort of it's probably sort of in terms of hockey, their town is about as much about hockey as anywhere else in America, and it's close to Canadian levels of support for that team. So I think it would be good for the town of Buffalo and good for the sport if Buffalo get right, and I hope they do. And the exciting news for me though is that I'm actually going to see the Edmonton Oilers, who are actually not a kick in the backside out of the playoff spots at the moment, even though they've not had the best of starts. In fact, they're second in the wild card race, which means that they're currently in the playoffs if the playoffs were to start today. But basically, I want to go see Connor McDavid and Draisaitl, and I'm really looking forward to it. I'm going to see that on Hogmanay, so I will do a little bit sort of maybe posting stories and stuff like that on Instagram, or a little bit of tweeting about some of the photos and some of the experiences of that particular game, because being in Canada, Hogmanay, for an ice hockey game, I can't think of anything more Canadian, and I'm really looking forward to it because Canadians do hockey right, Anyway, let's move on from sort of just talking generically about sports for a wee while and look back at some of the podcasts I've done this year. I've really enjoyed having guests on, and I hope I get more guests on in the future. I'm trying to line them up. I reached out to Progressive Rugby. They've now reached out to me, so when I'm back from my honeymoon, I do hope to speak to them. That Me reaching out to them earlier in the season, it just didn't work out with timing, and they have reached back out to me following the My Concussion Story podcast. And actually, that's one of the podcasts I'm very proud of. I'm proud that I got to tell a story about it, being honest and open about what I experienced. But I would say that podcast doesn't happen without the Cold Water Dips podcast with John McMillan. And if you've not checked that out, even if you're not if you're here just for a rugby podcast, you're here just for a NFL podcast or whatever. I mean, you're probably not here for just an NFL podcast because the NFL content's not amazing. But go back and listen to that podcast, the Cold Water Dips one. I think it's incredibly open and incredibly personal at a level that makes listening to it feel like you're part of a discussion about something bigger than yourself. And I have to say, it's the podcast I'm most proud of probably in all the time I've done podcasts, because I obviously have my BIHA podcast as well. It's one of the ones I'm most proud of. I really thank John for coming on, and he got me to go and do my cold water dip, and I did enjoy it. Unfortunately, circumstances meant I've not managed to go back to Edinburgh Blues Balls for a wee while, and to be honest, in the last couple of weeks I've been a little bit nervous about doing it, not just because of how cold it is here, but also just knowing that I'm going on my honeymoon on Christmas Day. I'm a little bit worried I'd catch a chill or something and then ruin the honeymoon for the wife. So yeah, I'm dead proud of that podcast in particular. And what I have noticed is that it's become a bigger thing, the cold water sort of therapy, if you want to call it that. I've seen Greg Kinnear, the former Still Game actor, is doing a dip for charity. And you see people just going out and doing it with their pals. You know, it doesn't have to necessarily be with a group like Edinburgh Blue Balls or whatever. And that's amazing to me. How many people enjoy this and how many people are benefiting from it. It's incredible. So I would say go and listen to it and then have a think if that's something that's for you. In terms of other things that I want to talk about in the pods moving forward, one of the things I'm really super keen to try and get someone from is tech ball. For those of you who don't know, tech ball is a sport I discovered late night on Eurosport, and it's a hybrid between table tennis, volleyball, and football. It does show, funnily, one of my friends from high school that I still know on Facebook had posted after the World Cup final that the World Cup final showed why football is the best sport in the world, because it's so accessible, and it produces amazing moments. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, I didn't really watch much of the World Cup this year. I kind of wasn't interested in it. Largely the Qatar thing made me not want to watch it very much. I just didn't really have time for it. Normally it's in the summer, so in a summer where there is less sports that you normally watch week to week, it's quite a good distraction. But in the November, December time, it's just rubbish, isn't it? So he put that football's one of the best sports in the world, and football's not my favourite sport. That's to be said. But one of the things that I do like about it, and he was absolutely right, is just how accessible, how easy it is to get a game of football, and how many different adaptations you can make to a game of football to play to the numbers of people that might be available to play football. I mean, and this is what I think is great about tech ball, because tech ball kind of reminds us of that, because in a way, if you're a football fan, a lot of footballers, they practice keepy-uppies and that to get used to controlling the ball, and tech balls are you need that ability to do keepy-uppies, but you also need the ability to have incredible hips that can fold in all different ways to get power into the ball kicking it down into a table. And I think, it just all sums up to say that football is king because of its accessibility. It's a sport that you can do with two or three people, and you can play heads and volleys or whatever variation you want to play. It's very easy to simplify it, whereas other sports, and include rugby, ice hockey, NFL, they're complicated sports and they're difficult to get into. And that's why football is number one in the world. Jumpers for goalposts, and you can still play a game with your pals. And that's what's beautiful about it. And in many ways, I think that's why I kind of enjoy going down to the local non-league teams and watching them play. Just the passion these guys have for football. It's very simple. It's not as skillful maybe as it's not as skillful as the players you see in the World Cup. They'd be paid mega bucks. But that's what's beautiful about football. So I hope you continue to enjoy football, and if you're looking for something to do, take the kids to go down and see one of your local clubs. Before I sort of wrap up, there's two or three things I still want to touch on. I want to talk about this Benetton thing, and a player being given a banana, a black rugby player being given a banana in a bag for their Secret Santa, and then other players in the team sort of laughing. I know, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend I'm some kind of saint, I know that sort of racial banter happens, and it has happened in the past with people, and some people, the minority person, buy into it, or sometimes they're the ones who initiate that sort of thing, and and that sort of thing. But this really upset me, the banana thing, because it's like, it's a well-known slur. It's a well-known thing that some calling a black person a monkey it's just not on. And to give them a banana, and it's your own teammate, and then all think that's really funny, I'm sorry, but it's not on. It's, to differentiate between that and what the fans have done to players and terrorised them, it's awful. It's not a good thing, and it's really made me sad. And Benetton's PR, in response to this, has been almost SRU-like, and is really not on. They should have condemned the player immediately, and I would think long and hard before I bring a player back that would do something like that. That's humiliating a player. That's not a little bit of back and forth where you're speaking to each other and that sort of thing. It's not banter, because you're doing it from behind the veil of a Secret Santa thing where he doesn't know who sent him that. It could be any one or number of his teammates. Absolutely shocking. And I don't know why you do that to your teammate. I don't know why you do it to anyone, but to do it to someone who you play beside during the week, someone who looks after you, when you're on the park or whatever, it's ridiculous, because sport is sort of it's a family thing. When you're playing team sports, after a while, you build memories with people you don't even realise you had. So don't. I just don't understand it. And the sooner that World Rugby and stuff has a policy, they need a uniform policy across clubs and how clubs can deal with these sorts of things, or at least give clubs guidelines as to how to deal with these sorts of things and how to stamp it out. We're going to keep losing players from rugby. We can't think that sort of there'll be a little bit of a sort of watercress sandwich club who'll think that that's okay and it's just tongue in cheek and it's just fun. But that's not the type of thing that's just fun, because you're doing it so discreetly and secretly and underhandedly that it's clearly a dig, because that's how you really feel inside. So yeah, I don't understand it, and World Rugby needs to step in here and say, look, we're going to have some kind of policy to help teams that are struggling like this. That's the other point I would make in terms of today. I saw things saying that the referees were going to form under one world umbrella. That should have always happened for international referees. It's absolutely ludicrous that it hasn't. They should all be learning from each other, singing off the same hymn sheet, and we shouldn't have one week it's Matthew Renal, so the rucks are an absolute free-for-all, and the next week it's JP Doyle, so you can't even try and jackal once. So these are obvious things that need dealt with. But I'm sorry, Benetton, I hate to bring it back up, but shame on you guys for allowing that to happen and for being so blasé in your response to it on social media, and addressing it with the fans. I do concede that my Italian's is non-existent, so the translate tweet button might not be direct, but that's absolute rubbish, from what I read on Twitter. Go and check it out for yourself and be your own judge of it. But yeah, that doesn't exist it shouldn't exist in sport, shouldn't exist in society. So say banter, there's a level of banter, and you can work it out with the person as you get to know them. If it's a person that, you're going to have a discussion about nationalities and a bit of laugh about that, that's fine. But that's between you and the person, and it shouldn't be private, and it certainly shouldn't be to humiliate them in front of everybody else who maybe isn't in on your personal relationship. It's just absolutely awful, and I'm sorry, but it can't stand. This player should not be back playing. I don't know how you trust playing with him if you're any of the minority players in that team. The last thing I wanted to talk about, and I've been sort of stuttery and a bit all over the place in this podcast, I do apologise, but this last topic is quite tough, and in fact I wasn't sure I was going to say anything, because it's all very soon, but I do want to say that my thoughts and sincere condolences are with the Broadfoot family right now, with a Foresters Rugby Club right now, and the players I've played with there, and the people who look after that club. Foresters lost Sean Broadfoot. He was only 34 years old. I played for the club. I joined the club when I was 29. I haven't been around as much recently, so I've not grown up with the players there like they have, and formed that bond over time from school and stuff. But it hit me today that I associate colourblind with Sean, because I remember him dancing and singing to it in the changing room after a game, and just being a total character. I also associate Crash Land by Twin Atlantic with him, because I remember him soloing it. And it's just quite funny that these bonds we form in sport, and it's just, I found it hard to fathom, and I found it really difficult to understand how someone so full of life, who was so welcoming, has been taken. And I'm not going to say any more on it, but I just want to let everyone know that look after each other, and be good to each other, and have a great Christmas and New Year, everyone. Thanks for listening to the podcast, and sticking with it. And I'm just going to leave the final whistle out tonight, and just say that my condolences and thoughts are with the Broadfoot family and Foresters right now.